Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the producer-led webinar. We're going to be live from the field, so I'm really excited for this webinar. This is the 6th webinar in the producer-led webinar series, Planting New Ideas, Growing Conservation. So for those of you who've joined us before on these monthly webinars, welcome back. And for those of you who are just joining today, welcome. This webinar series is put together by DATCAP and Discovery Farms. My name is Erica Olson and I work for the Discovery Farms program. We are a research and outreach organization that's part of the Division of Extension. And the producer-led watershed grant program, part of DATCAP, is also a partner in this webinar. And Dana Crystal is going to be live from the field with Matt Winker and Andy Holschbach from the Ozaukee County Demo Farms Network. And we're going to be talking about no-tilling into heavy red clays and some other conservation practices that's going on the eastern side of Wisconsin. A couple of housekeeping things. If you're watching live from Facebook, you can ask questions on there and we will try to facilitate those. Otherwise, if you're joining us on Zoom, we'll take questions throughout the webinar for Matt and Andy. Just please type them in the chat as I have muted everyone just so we can eliminate background noise and be able to hear Dana, Matt, and Andy. They're coming to us from Belgium, Wisconsin, and I'll pass the microphone over to you, Dana.
All right, thank you, Erica. And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. We're here out on the farm with Matt and Andy. So before we get started though, I just want to cover some DATCAP updates. So first and foremost, application materials, the request for proposal for the 2021 grant application cycle was sent out a few weeks ago. And something new for this year is that the grant applicant pool will be set into 2 different tiers. One being newer applicants, or those who have been around for less than 2 years. Then others that have been established for longer than 2 years. So be sure to check that out. That's on our website, and Rachel also sent that out to the listserv. Applications this year will be due September 21st. Also, Rachel and I pre-recorded a webinar that kind of goes through the new requirements for the grant application, and we'll be hosting a live listening session for that, and that will be on August 25th at noon, and we'll send out more information on that. Third, I just want to point out that if any of you, either within producer-led groups or Demo Farms networks or farmers that have been tuning into our webinar series so far, if you're out in the field and you're getting some good pictures or video, do feel free to use our hashtag live from the field, and that will kind of start an archive of different field activities for this year. And then lastly, I just want to make a shout for the Wisconsin Farm Support Program. So the 2nd round of applications is open for that. That went live yesterday, August 10th. And so if you're looking for more information on that, you can go to revenue.wi.gov. So now we'll turn it over to Matt and Andy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ozaukee County. It's a real pleasure to be able to show you some of our work that we're doing here in the county, in the eastern part of the state here. Just so you know, a lot of people don't know where Ozaukee County is. We're actually just north of Milwaukee County, and we're situated right along Lake Michigan. It's an even more of a pleasure for me to introduce to you Matt Winker. Matt is one of our demonstration farmers, and he's an excellent person to work with. He's willing to try new things, and we're really fortunate to have him as one of our demonstration farmers. So Matt, why don't we turn it over to you? If you could talk a little bit about your farm and a little bit about yourself, your family, and why you're doing no-till and why you're doing what it is you're doing.
All right, I'm Matt Winker. Me and my wife Sarah run Redline Dairy. We're here in Belgium. We got 2 daughters, 19 and 13. Well, this is actually where her family homesteaded. We purchased the farm in 2014. And that's kind of what got us started in the no-tilling. Is when we purchased the farm, we did make some improvements and racked up a lot of debt. And we started really sitting down, where can we save money? We want to be successful. We don't want to be, some farms that are unfortunate enough to be able to not continue farming. We didn't want to go down that road. This is what we enjoy doing. We're in extremely red heavy clay. We're about 4 to 5 miles off of Lake Michigan. People pick on me, coming from, inland counties, and it'll be June. I got a winter hat on yet. And it's like, it's cold here yet. And them are some of the challenges we face. We are so close to the lake. We are cold early spring on. We do get a lot of heavy rains. The ground don't dry out. And especially in clay, it just doesn't dry. Word of crap. So we started looking into no-tilling. I was very skeptical at first. I said, how is this going to work in red heavy clays? I just kind of started going to different schools. No-till, National No-Tillage Conference. I've been to that a couple times now. Stevens Point Cover Crop Conference, been to that. I try and catch that every year. Surround yourselves around other people that already have been doing it. Learn from them, and not everything that works for me or works for guys inland in the sandy soil and the warmer temperatures are gonna, work vice versa. So it's kind of a learning curve, and not every year's been successful. We've had some struggles. We certainly learned from it. This year, with all our heavy pounding rains, we did actually, for the first time ever, use a residual chemical in our spray, and we still got weeds. So it's every year's different, and but we are changing the soil to where it's amazing how, like, last year we were chopping and it's wet. We are running with smaller equipment. We are pulling wagons yet, but with a pull type chopper. We were just leaving a little bit of smear marks on a two-wheel drive. Hauling wagons in two-wheel drive, and our neighbors, unfortunately, were cutting ruts and getting pulled out. So it does make a huge difference. I'm glad we took the route we took, and hopefully we keep learning and keep getting better.
And being a dairy farmer, can you talk a little bit about how many cows you milk and that sort of thing?
We milk 100 cows. It's just me and her. Luckily for us, we have an uncle that retired from his regular job, so he helps us drive tractor. He's my fix-it guy. Just put him in a shop, but it's only the 3 of us, and we still got a lot of work with the cows to do, and because the cows are what make us money. Field work is comes a secondary, so we got to take care of the cows first.
And being so close to Lake Michigan and working in a community where we have a lot of people with a lot of different opinions, did you receive a lot of pushback from your neighbors at all when they saw you starting to
No. We run a field that's right next to a Catholic church. I'm sure they got to talk about a lot of the crazy stuff I was doing, but that's okay. I'm not afraid to try new things, new ideas.
And you started no-till roughly about 6 years ago, roughly?
Yep, 2015 was the first field where I strictly no-tilled in spring, and I was scared to death. I'm not going to lie to you. But it turned out on that particular field, it was the best crop of corn we had on that field just about ever. So, yeah, like I said, it's not always been successful. We've had successes, we've had failures, and we try and always do the best we can with it. So,
and from what I see, it seems like every year you're doing a little better.
Yep.
You learn every year. You
try
different things.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah.
And the thing that there's always that variable is every weather year is different. It's last 3 years we've got started with the demo farms and all the different talks we've had with on-farm discussions, and we kind of feel like we're failing a little bit with all the nasty heavy rains we've had, but there's still success to come out of it. I can say of all the farm fields we run, I only had one field that washed, and we've had some pretty nasty.
Speaking of water and the heavy
washers.
Rains, how do you deal with these heavy rain events, especially when you get ruts in your field you're trying to continue no-till, but sometimes
try and stay out of them.
you work them in a little bit.
If we do, last fall we combined corn, and there was a couple spots of a field here or there that got dinged a little bit. We do run with a Great Plains vertical till, and this spring I went out and I just hit them particular spots and left the rest of the field alone.
And I know you do a lot of work with cover crops and so on. You utilize cover crops and no-till as a system.
Yep.
And you're really involved with soil health. How have you seen a difference in your soil in regards to how it handles these heavy rain events? Does your equipment carry a lot better?
Yeah, big time. I mean, our fields will get muddy, but it's a different kind of mud. You don't get that schmeary where it just packs, where it's kind of like half water, half mud. We just don't get that anymore. It'll stick to you a little bit, but it more kind of crumbles off everything a lot easier. We do drag a lot less mud out in the fields, especially when we're chopping corn. We try not to be out there when it's muddy, but it does, even the top dries off so much faster. That's one thing we notice. I mean, we'll get an inch of rain if you're in a decent weather pattern. If you just let it sit for a day, maybe two, I mean, you can go out there and not.
Yeah.
It's like it hadn't rained for a week.
And earlier, Matt, you talked about profitability. You switched over to this to be more sustainable long-term. Can you talk a little bit more about profitability and maybe reduction in fuel? Talk about your
fuel
fertilizer
savings
management.
is huge. We cut our fuel almost in half. And diesel fuel, yeah, it's $2 a gallon, but it's still an expense, and we don't want to buy any more fuel than what we need. But so yeah, our fuel reduction was around 50% from the years we were still doing all tillage. Fertilizer savings, the more I got into it, I noticed that we could actually cut out our P&K, especially in the corn starter. We didn't, it just didn't do it. And the reason I caught it, because the corn planter behind us, which we'll show later, has got interplant rows, and I did one field on 15-inch rows for corn silage, and them interplant rows don't have starter on them. And they came up the exact same, and I'm like, why am I spending this money? We don't need to. We still need to buy our nitrogen. And this year, I think we're starting to find out that sulfur is kind of becoming an issue, that I think we're going to have to purchase sulfur with our nitrogen more on a regular basis. But P&K, we have not purchased P&K in 3 years now.
Okay, with that, I think what we should do is take a look at your planter. If you could tell us about maybe some of the unique traits of your no-till planter, maybe some of the changes you've made over the years.
All right. Well, this is a John Deere 1780. I bought this, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, the year we started no-tilling. Reason I bought it is I wanted to interplant rows to do 15s or 30s, whichever I wanted to do. It's not my color of choice. I always threaten a John Deere dealer, I'm going to paint it red and black. They don't think that's too funny. This one is set up with dry. Maybe isn't my choice, but it's what it came with, so I stayed with it. So it is running a single disc opener for the dry starter. We have been only using nitrogen and sulfur the last 2 years. In a dry form, I do use Nutrisphere coated, and I noticed it doesn't get that wet, soppy granular if you coat it with Nutrisphere. It flowed really nice. It didn't ball up into your fertilizer wagon. Like I said, it wouldn't be, I think liquid would be the way to go. This is how this planter was set up when I bought it, so I kind of stayed that direction for now. Then we move back here. These are Getter roll cleaners. I purchased these a couple years ago. First couple years we did run without them. Put them on. They were from local neighbor of ours. They wanted to get rid of them, said I'd take them. I really like how if you are into some corn stubble from the years previous, it does do a really nice job of kicking them corn stalks to the side. They were used, so obviously I didn't have to pay a whole lot for them. Obviously I had to do some work to them, but they turned out really, really nice. It was originally, did have a no-till blade on it. 2 years ago, I took them off. The first couple of years I ran with them on. I thought we were far enough along in the no-tilling with cover crops. I didn't think we needed them anymore. When you have a no-till blade on here and you also have your seed wheels in the back, you're basically taking your downforce and you're splitting it over two blades. If you take your no-till blade off, now you have 100% of your downforce to use on your seed blade. And actually, the last 3 years now, I've never had to crank this thing to full downforce to get the seed where we need it. The other thing I noticed when you don't have that no-till blade on here anymore, it doesn't whip a lot of wet ground because we are in heavy clay. It's not that schmeary wet anymore, but it still is wet, and it's zinging it around. And I noticed when we took these off, it kept the seed wheels in the back a lot cleaner. So I've been really happy actually running without them. Now anybody that's transitioning from full tillage into no-till, you may have to run with them on the first couple of years. But once you get into it, your ground will get firmer, but a lot softer and a lot easier to work with. You'll probably be able to take them off. That's just my opinion from using them. I have no intentions of putting them back on unless we were to start from scratch on somebody's farm field somewhere that I thought we'd have to put them back on. But
Matt, I know you do some planting green. When you're planting green, do you have any other changes that you do, or are you putting more down pressure on your planter?
Nope. When we plant, we try and plant green on all of our fields. This year, I have to admit, I got a little anxious on planting. We were planting in the end of April, just because the last couple of years it's been so wet. I mean, it's first week of June before we can get out there. So I said, we're going. And I mean, if the stuff was green, but it was so short, it really didn't affect it any. But even in fields that we're in, chest high rye, I had no issues whatsoever with these things balling up at all. Nothing. I mean, you might get a few stems or something wrapped around a little bit and stuck in between your cleaner for your shark teeth. But like I said, it had no issues with them whatsoever. So, and I did try I do have 2 rows set up. These are the prescription tillage STP blades. We did try them out this year for the first time, and I had the 2 outside rows set up with them. Just ideally, you probably would have put them more in the center of the planter. I put them here just so I can get out. They're easy to look at and find. I really like them. The only issue I had with them is if I did get in some spots that were muddy, they seem to throw a lot more wet ground around, and I was running into issues of getting dirt in between the seed blade and your press wheel here. Certainly, this is an older planter. It's a 99, so it ain't brand new anymore. Can be a little bit that it is wore a little bit here, that this tire is pulling out a little bit. Another thing could do is the newer, if you have a brand new tire on, this edge here is more lipped. It could be that. Another thing we could look at too in the future is running a spoked tire and rim. If you do get mud in between here, that will just allow it to come out of your seed press wheel. So this planter is vacuum. So obviously we're running with the vacuum meters. Been happy with it. I think it's more accurate. We are running with the precision meters on the main 6 corn rows, just a regular meter on the inner plant rows for soybeans. So we're planting all our corn and all our soybeans with this corn planter. We try to anyhow. If we're running out of time, we'll throw soybeans in the Granger. We got a 1560 drill that will plant soybeans with it.
And your planting depth is roughly about 2 inches.
Corn, we're about 2 1/4. We'll run to. It goes a little deeper. I don't get too excited. Soybeans, we probably stay around an inch, 1 1/4. We don't want to bury them things too much, or you might not see them come back. But as our soil keeps getting healthier, it will warm up faster in the spring. We might be able to push our depth down a little further.
With continuous no-till, have you seen the soils become a little more mellow and easier to work with?
Yeah, it's unbelievable how much softer our ground is. The first couple of years I started no-tilling, we were running full downforce on this planter just to get it in the ground. And now, to anybody that's running a John Deere, there's 4 settings on it. I haven't gone above number 3, and it's been at least 3 years now. And
you know, oftentimes, Matt, in Ozaukee County, you hear people say, well, no-till doesn't work in the heavy clay soils. They tend to stay wetter in the spring. They don't warm up as quickly. What would you say to that?
It's actually the opposite. We're actually able to get out just as soon as other guys are getting antsy to take the viber shanks out in the field. The thing I notice, and I do have some neighbors that are still conventional tilling yet, and that's fine, but I can see their viber shank tracks from where their tractor drove in their fields, where ours you don't see that that wet ground compaction soil.
And it takes time. You have to be patient.
I plant slow. I mean, I won't plant any faster than 5 miles an hour, but you got to keep in mind, when I got the planter loaded and full, it's just me. There's nobody tilling up ahead of you. There's nobody spreading fertilizer ahead of you. All you got to do, it's just you. And you just take your time. You're still getting a lot done, even though I'm planting slow. I mean, I can get about 6-7 acres an hour is about all I can do in an hour.
Can you talk about the importance of cover crops, no-till and cover crops as a system?
Your cover crops, what them root systems will do, will allow your soil to get mellower and hold it in place. That's the biggest thing. Unfortunately, the way the weather's been the last how many years, we just get these pounding rains. And if you don't allow to get yourself a nice root system in there, that soil will disappear, especially in your low spots. But it's not just about no-till. We do need to use a no-till cover crop. We started out using bin run winter wheat.
Okay.
And I've had success doing it that way. We've now gone to using winter rye. We'll probably still use some winter wheat this year just because it's sitting in the shed in a wagon. But it's not always, you don't have to spend $30-$40 an acre on cover crop seed. It's sometimes just, even if you're going behind your corn and your beans, just try and get a crop of winter wheat out there. It's maybe not the best situation, but it's something. Just get something out there. If you're coming behind your winter wheat, yeah, let's, get a good cocktail mix out there, 7, 9-way, 11-way mix. That's really going to put a lot of nitrogen, a lot of fertility, a lot of tilth into your soil, a lot of glues. The glues is what holds your soil together.
So being a dairy farmer, you take a lot of corn silage off. After the corn silage is harvested, are you immediately then following up with the cover crop?
Yep, we'll pull as soon as we're done chopping. We'll pull right in back with the grain drill. Usually throw a rye in behind them. We do use some of that for feed for the heifers. It makes beautiful feed to anybody out there that's dairying. Excellent feed. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, part of our failures has been our rye crop has just not been very good. But it's
been so challenging.
It's been such a miserable fall the last couple of years, and that's not always. You don't always have control of everything just because you're no-till and cover crop, and you try your best, and you're still getting a decent stand out there. Your low spots might float over, but eventually the more we can no-till and cover cropping, the more they're going to drain and handle them heavy rains, that it will be able to grow something in them. So you can't give up.
I'm a firm believer in the soil health principles. If you can do no-till and cover crops long-term, I've seen it where the water infiltration rates change. And I think we as conservation departments, if we over time can get more and more people to do what you're doing, we're going to really do a lot to improve water quality.
Yeah. I'm hoping not for a drought. So anybody listen, I'm not praying for a drought, but I would actually
less rain.
I would actually like to see us in a dry New Year once, because I'm kind of excited. I want to see how do we stack up against our conventional neighbors as far as waterfall. Because the guys that are further inland are in a lot lighter soil than we are. Their crops just look phenomenal this year, whether they're doing tillage or no-till. And it's just because they can handle these pounding rains, and we just unfortunately gets the downfall of being in red heavy clay. But we are still seeing success, even with seeing the failures of this year.
Oh, good. It sounds like you're doing very well with your no-till planter. You're getting good seed depth, good seed closure, good crop production. You're saving a little money.
Oh yeah, saving
Yep.
a lot of money.
Okay.
So on the closing side
yeah.
of things, what we're running, and there's all kinds of different ideas or different brands, different companies have different ideas. We're currently running one rubber tire with one Yetter spike closing wheel. One thing I did change in here, there was an additional spacer in here, and I was having trouble 2 years ago with our soybean rows not closing. I took that spacer out, and this year it had very good success. We are running with a seed firmer, just to firm your corn seed, your soybean seed. Like there again too, there's all kinds of different brands out there. It's what do you like, what do you prefer? This is just what I'm running. It doesn't, say that what I'm running is right. There's different combinations out there that you can use.
Okay, I think what we can do is move along from the no-till planter to some of the other innovative type of things that you're doing here.
A reminder, if anyone has questions as we go along, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll ask those to Matt.
So we'll talk about our two groups later in the presentation. Me and two other farmers are demo farms for Ozaukee County, but there's also the Milwaukee River Watershed, which is the Clean Farm Families. Our two groups, we actually meet together, we work together. This was a cover crop crimper. It was purchased for Fund for Lake Michigan. It's a Rodale Institute design.
Right.
Chaseburg Manufacturing built it for us.
Yeah, actually made in Wisconsin, Coon Valley, Wisconsin.
Yep. So we actually got to get it dirty this year, which was nice to see.
Took the paint off a
yep,
little bit.
got the paint off it. And we got a trailer for it, so anybody that's within shouting distance of us certainly can use it. It's just basically like a combine header trailer that Mike Paulus is an excellent fabricator, so he designed it that this machine fits right on there. We can trail it anywhere. So this one, we did have 4 farms got to use it this year. 3 of them pulled it behind a tractor, and I actually had purchased a front hitch for our MX240, which is on the front of the planter, and I spun the drum around, and actually it's in a direction I use it because I was the last one to use it. So that we actually had the roller out ahead of the tractor, crimping rye. It was, and in the good spots, it was about waist high. It was pollinated. But like I said, unfortunately, last fall was such a disaster with our weather. It was really uneven, but it's still where the rye was nice and thick, pollinated. It laid it nice and tight to the ground, and it was kind of fun. The only thing I can say was kind of nerve-wracking. The weight of this machine is 2,500 pounds. Then I filled it with water, so I added another 1,100 pounds. And I had duals. There's front duals for the 240, and it made them tires squat pretty good and hard. I mean, you had to kind of really be careful when you were turning with it, and kind of chattery. Like I said, I only had the experience of it being on the front of the tractor. It did a beautiful, beautiful job. I took my sweet time with it, so we basically got the roll cereal rye down, put it down to the ground, seal our moisture in, keep our raindrops from pounding on our soil, and plant corn, close the furrow all in one pass. So, of course, I got everybody watching me when I was doing it. That was kind of nerve-wracking this year, but so that was my experience with it.
Yeah, right behind us here is actually the bean field that you planted no-tilled green into it, and then you utilize the roller crimper to crimp down the rye and the wheat.
So this bean field here, I planted May 12th. The rye, I want to say, was mid shin high, wasn't really all that much taller. And then I came back and I rolled it June 9th. And you can see here, we still do have a lot of rye stubble here that's helping keep our soil healthy. And this will be broken down yet by the end of this year. And this is, you might be using nitrogen to decompose this, but you will get it all back. So, and obviously, and soybeans and rye love each other. And unfortunately, yes, you can see we do have some weeds out here this year. I don't mind some weeds here or there. It's not something we really want to see.
Well, your pods are developing really nicely on here. You got a lot of good production here, I think.
And this field, yeah, it's hard to see on the computer, but this field's around waist high with soybeans.
Yeah, so with crimping, we really learned that it's got to be done when the rye is dense, when the rye is in the flowering stage. And we rushed it a little bit. I think we knew there was this tropical storm coming.
There was a hurricane coming to Wisconsin, so we hurried up and crimped it before that nailed us. So yeah, I was about a week early, but just with the weather that was coming in, it was now or never.
Yeah, and we're hoping that more and more people utilize the crimper and plant green. And if you can crimp and have it successful, you don't have to use as much herbicide and so on. So
ideally, you want to be, if you're fall planting your rye, about 2 to 2.5 bushel. I would go at least 2.5 has been my experience using it. Yeah. You want a nice thick stand out there because when you want that stuff to roll down, you want it pretty much covering your soil because that's what's armoring your soil from all these nasty rains, and it's going to keep your soil in place. And I did have actually in a field that we planted with the roller crimper, I did notice in the valley, actually I gained about 6 skid-loader buckets of soil from my neighbor. So
oh yeah, I remember seeing
going through a valley, I actually went uphill to go back downhill to go back uphill again. So you'd be surprised at how much soil, when you have good cover crops out here, how much you save. And if you're downhill from your neighbors, how much soil you will pick up and maintain from him. Send him a Christmas card and a thank you when you get that far. So
next one.
We do have a couple questions in the chat. Maybe we could ask those.
Sure.
Do you use any other crops besides the rye and the wheat, such as hairy vetch? That was a specific question.
Yep, we have, and actually we're going to talk about the interseeder next. We did last year get to use it, and actually if you spin this way, if you look up, if you can see me pointing here, there's a soybean field right on next to my hay field there. That field was interseeded 2019 in the corn, and actually because of the fall was so wet last year, I let it go. I planted green into that field April 21st is my first soybeans we planted. I had, I would say, about 60 to 65% of the field was growing green. We did get interseeded late just because the interseeder wasn't here yet. So we kind of were up against the clock a little bit. The second interseeder showed up, it was out hitting up. I think there was 4 of us that did interseeding last year. Right. So that was my one experience with it last year. We did do all of our cornfields this year with it. And in the mix was annual ryegrass, kale, hairy vetch, some rapeseed, and I'm missing one more. Red clover. And all 5 species were growing in that field this spring. It just was, as where the corn was thinner last year, it was a very successful cover crop where the corn is really good. It didn't grow quite as much. The secret to solving that problem is get the interseeder out there sooner, get yourself planted. Quicker to get that crop established before your canopy.
And all of those plants overwinter.
And they all overwinter,
which is a little surprising.
And did you try crimping any other species?
No, the only thing I crimped was winter rye.
How tall?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
How tall was the rye when you crimped it?
About chest high in the good spots. It was about waist high in the thinner spots. It was just a thin stand, and it was nothing I did. It was all Mother Nature just playing games with us. There's nothing. And I had that field planted early. I would say I was in, I want to say the 3rd week of September, 4th week of September with it, and it still just did not grow where the crap. It was so cold, so wet. There's only so much of this stuff you try your best, and you're just gonna sometimes get your butt kicked by Mother Nature. There's nothing you can do about it.
Sure. Were there any other questions about the roller crimping, Erica?
There's 2 more questions. What was your seeding rate of the rye, and have you noticed the rye to help with water hemp?
Yeah, if you can get a good stand of rye, you will suppress it. Are you going to eliminate it? Probably not. But I did notice, like in this particular field, I know that right here where we're standing, You can see it all growing here. It was really thin in this
Yeah.
particular spot. Where it was really thick up down the hill here, there's very little weeds, and that's, yes, so the thicker cover crop you have growing, the better. And another thing, what we've done is we have cut our corn maturity dates back. We're currently running 87, 88, maybe a 90-day corn. We have ratcheted them maturities back. I think it's better to get a cover crop established in fall. I'm kind of relying on interseeding this year. We can get our corn off, say the 3rd, 4th week of October. That's going to allow us a good month, maybe less, to get that them cover crops really established well, growing well, to overwinter, to come back in the spring.
You also utilize some naked seed too, right?
Yep, soybeans. 100% of my soybeans this year are planted naked. And like I said, the field that you can kind of see, you can see me here pointing the distance, that was planted April 21st. And it's, I would say it's just as well as this field here. That was planted naked, and it was cold. And I was planting in a t-shirt, and it was so cold I didn't even want to get out to hardly look at the planter. That's how cold it was.
What was your main reason for utilizing naked seed?
So, in our seed treatments, yes, they do help our seed. They also are kind of like a toxic thing to our soil. Biology. So I'm trying to kind of find what corn varieties are going to do well for us, and my plan is to go 100% naked seed on corn as well.
Yeah, so you're really working hard to get the nutrient cycle functioning, the water cycle.
To anybody that's kind of knows some of the speakers, Ray Archuleta, I've learned so much from. Gabe Brown from North Dakota, Russell Hedricks, who we've had to speak at our Ozaukee County meeting.
Steve Groff is another one we have.
Groff. So on Gabe Brown, who stood up in front of me and talked and showed his soil tests compared to his neighbors, I mean, they were just through the roof. Hasn't purchased any commercial fertilizer, I think, since 2009.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what my goal is. I mean, that ain't going to happen tomorrow by any means, but that's kind of the goal where I'm working towards. You know, it might take me 10, 15 years, especially being in dairy. We keep 100% of our soybeans on farm here, 100% of our corn, and all our hay. So we're not really, we always have enough feed. We don't usually have a whole lot of excess. So it's kind of harder for me versus a cash grain guy that can grow a lot of winter wheat, throw a lot of your 7, 9, 11 weight mixes. That's where you're going to gain a lot of your fertility and in a quicker hurry. I don't have that luxury, so we're kind of trying to use our interseeding to the best of our ability. Soybeans, I'm following up with either a winter rye or a winter wheat. Them two just love each other. Your soybeans will really shine. So it's.
So I think we'll maybe take a couple minutes to go over the interseeder, and then we'll switch over
and the
to
rye.
the,
I think the rye.
we'll take a couple minutes at the interseeder.
The rye usually I plant in the fall about 2.5 bushels an acre. I think that was another question. Yeah.
Matt, did you use a herbicide application with the rye?
Yep. So all my stuff this year did get sprayed. We used glyphosate, obviously AMS, and I did use a chemical called metolachlor. It's residual. First time I ever used the residual. And unfortunately, just the timing of our spraying this year, we had so many pounding rains just hit us back to back to back. Kind of took my residual out of our fields. And by the time it's kind of part of dairy, you know, we're making hay, I do some spraying for the neighbor. By the time I came back to my own stuff, our soybeans are actually starting to flower, and our corn, it was getting too late for me to get in there and spray because we're so close to interseeding, or we have interseeded already. So that's where it kind of bit me this year. We probably should have sprayed our soybeans twice. Like I said, it did use a residual. It should have carried. Unfortunately, it didn't. So we'll go back to the drawing board next year and see what else we can come up with. You want want to talk about this one? Or
Yeah, I can just talk real briefly about this. This is an interseeder planter that we at the county had purchased. We actually received a grant from the Fund for Lake Michigan, which we were real fortunate to get. Several years ago, our Milwaukee Water Families group, we had a 4-row interseeder planter that we were dabbling with in some of our demo plots. And that came from Penn State University. Our farming group decided, well, why don't we try to learn more about interseeding here in the county so that when the corn silage is taken off, there's a better opportunity to get some of our cover crops established. So anyhow, we purchased an interseeder planter. And with this interseeder planter, we went to our Clean Farm Families group and we were asking them, how can we best utilize this interseeder? And they said, really, to make it work, because we have such a short window of time.
That was UPS truck.
Okay, delivering your Christmas presents. Yeah. So what we did is we have a farmer who does all the planting. We lease a tractor, and we offer
From Farmers Implement.
Yeah, from Farmers Implement in Ellington. Give a little plug there.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken Falk.
Yeah, we were really fortunate that the Fund for Lake Michigan is so real supportive of us in our soil health movement. They helped us with the crimper and this interseeder planter, and Ozaukee County kicked in some funds as well. But we're able to, in order to get more interseeding done in the county, we charge a farmer like $14 an acre. He gets it planted by a farmer who does the planting. He gets to use the interseeder. He's got to use his own seed. But we do also have another grant from the Fund for Lake Michigan where we can offer cost sharing for seed as well. We've been so successful with it. Matt is one of the farmers here in the county that's been doing interseeding. We're dabbling in it. We're trying to utilize different seed mixes and see which ones perform the best. It's a really heavy duty planter. If anyone has any questions about the interseeder planter, where to get it, that sort of thing, we'd be glad to help out on that. Matt, any thoughts on the interseeding that you've done?
Yeah, we've done it 2 years now. Last year, like I said, I think we had a decent success with it.
Mm-hmm.
We would have had a better success had we been in a little sooner, but we were waiting for the planter to literally arrive to get here, to get going. So we did put a scale on it. That was one thing that the group wanted to put on, because we are planting in such light rates. You do have to kind of see where you're at. This particular planter is also set up with nitrogen. There's 3 tanks on the front, so you can apply nitrogen and interseed all at the same time. And this one, actually, we can, at the end, and when we're done planting with it now, obviously it's been sitting in my yard for about 3 weeks. There's actually additional row units here that we'll put back in, and a farmer who wants to do no-tilling of winter wheat or summer seed, some alfalfa, certainly can use it and rent it if somebody is looking to, they don't have a no-till planter. This is a way to help get you started until you can afford to either buy your own or, like I said, it's here to rent. So
And that's the beauty of it too. It converts to a no-till drill.
Yep.
And an interseeder planter.
Yep. So yeah, it's like I said, we've learned a lot in the last 2 years. I think we still got a little bit of learning to do, but it's nice to see when you take the corn off, there is something there that is starting to grow. Now you unshaded it, so it will take off, depending on where you are in the year, obviously.
Yeah, and just to kind of share how these farmer networks benefit from one another and all these producer-led groups. When we started doing the interseeding, we kind of questioned, well, what is the best seeding mix to utilize? And we actually called the Dodge County Farmer Group and spoke with Marty Weiss, and Marty's done a lot of work with interseeding, and he gave us his recommended seeding mix, and we utilized it here, and it's done very well. One of the grasses that does very well with interseeding is annual ryegrass. It tends to get a nice, real fibrous, massive root, and it does very well in the shade. So does the kale and the clovers. All of what we've used, like Matt had mentioned, has been real successful.
My kale was flowering this year, and I thought there was mustard growing out there, and I had to question Andy, what are we growing out here?
Right.
Well, no, it was actually
you were pleased to hear it was kale, right?
Yep, it was kale. And I had a lot of people really looking like, what are you doing out there? But it's to me, it's exciting. I love doing this stuff. I love seeing new results every year. And actually, another thing we're working with is Virginia Moore. We got some plots going this year with some summer mixes and some fall mixes side by side. We got them by 4 of us: Bob Roden, myself, Jim Melikar. I think it's just us 3, right?
You 3,
yeah. So
yeah, Virginia Moore, she's with the USDA Agricultural Research Service out of Beltsville, Maryland. She's a plant breeder, and she's interested in looking at shade tolerance in plants, and her whole idea is to breed more shade tolerance into some of these seed mixes that we utilize here in the state.
And we
so we'll see how that goes.
Got to sit down with her this winter. It was pretty cool because she got to hear from a small farmer like myself to the big farms, Jim Melikar and Bob Roden, the different issues both of us faced. I'm running with lighter equipment versus they're running with big self-propelled choppers, trucks, and it really is 2 different ways of farming because, you know, on certain conditions they can really destroy them cover crops. And that's one thing we kind of asked her, you know, we need something that's 1, shade tolerant, 2, traffic resistant, and we also want to be able to either roller crimp it or successfully chemically kill it in the spring. So I guess another thing I can share as far as our what we use for chemicals here. The last 5 years I have not used any insecticide whatsoever. Even the hay ground, I stopped doing that. No fungicide. The only thing we do use here is herbicide, obviously, for weed control. That's it. I mean,
so your profitability has been rather.
Yep. Even though we've
here.
had some struggles the last couple of years, we're still turning a profit. And it's not the biggest thing I learned in all the classes I've gone to, and I try and hit as many as my farming life will allow me to hit. It's you can't judge your crop by bushels to the acre. That's an old way of doing it. It's profit per acre is really what you got to look at. Yep. And try and keep it's no different in dairy farming. Try and keep the vet out of the yard. You got to try and keep as much as we do want our agronomists out here, you got to try and keep their chemicals there.
And one of your favorite sayings that I remember is you like to sign the back of the check versus the front of the check.
You want to sign the back of the check, not the front. So.
Okay.
So maybe we'll pause. Erica, were there any more questions about the practices? Otherwise, I think we'll jump into some more of the questions about the demo farms and the producer-led group.
I think that Matt answered most of the questions in his description, so I think we can move along.
All right. Well, so as was mentioned earlier, we're fortunate to have both a demo farm network and a producer-led group in this part of the state. So, Andy, can you talk a little bit more about how that got started, what sorts of resource concerns this network is addressing, and how many farms and things like that?
Okay. Yeah, in Ozaukee County, 70% of our area here is in the Milwaukee River watershed area, and we've heard of all the good things that the Lower Fox Demo Farm Network was doing and the Door Kiwani Network was doing. And we felt we really should have a demonstration farm network here in Ozaukee County. So we approached Angela Biggs from NRCS, and she was very supportive and provided the county a contribution agreement. And we worked real closely then with Eric Alness and Matt Otto. And by having a demonstration farm network, in addition to a producer-led group, you bring more resources to the table. We're getting more funding. We're getting more professional help from the different agencies. It really brings UW Extension, USDA, NRCS, the county, and our producer all together. And to be honest, it's probably one of the best things we've ever done is form our producer-led groups and have a demonstration farm network here in the county. We have 3 demonstration farmers here in the county, Matt being one of them. And with our Clean Farm Families group, which is funded through DATCAP, we all work together as one team. And we all bring the issue. We meet every 6 weeks or so, and we talk about some of the issues. We have fun too. So it gives a good focus on improving soil health in both farm network and the producer-led group. Our goal is to improve soils here in the county. And our county board has been really supportive of our efforts here. And we were hoping to have a soil health academy here last year with Ray Archuleta again and Gabe Brown and a few others. but due to this COVID business, we were not able to do that. But we're focused on soil health.
And we're the smallest county in the state too. And to have, I think, this good group in such a small county, I think really speaks for itself. And our southern part of our county is very populated, I guess you could call it.
More and more people,
yeah.
More urbanized.
Yep, because we are so close to Milwaukee County. So you do have kind of that very southern Ozaukee County is kind of a more ritzier suburb of Milwaukee
Right.
County, to say it nicely. So that's kind of what we're up against. I mean, we got to, as farmers, we want to be proactive instead of reactive, because there is a lot of city people up in this county seeing what we're doing. And, you know, we kind of want to eliminate our brown runoff that's coming off of these fields to kind of make ourselves look, you know, better.
Yeah, and when we utilize work real closely with Mike Patton from NRCS, and we utilize the soil health trailer, the rainfall simulator. When farmers see that, I mean, it really makes them realize that maybe they need to tweak things a little bit.
When city people see it, their jaw just drops. It was very cool.
Especially when you turn the tray over where you had the conventional soil that's been worked to death, and you see that the water just does not infiltrate.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can definitely see how having a demo farm network and a producer-led group can strengthen a lot of the partnerships that you mentioned before, and really aid in kind of educating the non-farming community. Can you talk a little bit more about the impact that these two groups have had on your rural communities?
Well, one of our issues that we promote, again, are no-till and cover crops, and we've had a lot of really good soil health field day events. We've had Ray Archuleta here probably 4 times. We had a 2-day field day with Ray, and we get a lot of people attending. We'll usually get maybe 90 to 100 folks attend. We usually do this in the winter, but we see more and more people starting to dabble in cover crops and no-till who have not done it before. There's more talk in the community. I'm sure in your social circle, you know, more and more people that are interested in dabbling in this. Our Clean Farm Families, we also have a demonstration site on State Highway 57. It's a site where we have 6 plots, and we're comparing conventional tillage to no-till and cover crops. And we look at each plot as a field. And I know when one of your neighbors was planting no-till corn into the clover cover crop, we started talking about soil health, and he says, well, I'm keeping an eye on Matt Winker.
Yeah, don't watch me.
I want to see what he does. So farmers, you know, they're working with Matt, they're watching Matt, they're letting Matt learn along the way, and I think as time goes on, more and more people are starting to try these things. So it's a real benefit.
And what I've seen too in my early years of no-tilling, even if I did make a mistake, I could afford it. Because you are sticking so much less into your soil. And the more you do get into it, you can start doing some of the things where I've done, where you're pulling, I mean, we're dairy farming, so I am getting P&K from there. If you're cash cropping, obviously you don't quite have that luxury, but you can start pulling some of this stuff away, and you're going to have just as good a crop as what you had before.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, it's all about profitability. How much money are you making? How can you best implement these practices so that you have long-term sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're coming up about maybe 5 minutes out to the 1 o'clock mark, but Matt and Andy had pulled some soil samples. So maybe to bring this discussion full circle, we'll take a look at those just to illustrate some of the differences that we've really been discussing throughout this whole webinar here. And if there's any questions that have come in about the demo farms or the Milwaukee Clean Farms family, we can take those now also.
If you have a question about the demo farms or the Clean Farm Families group, feel free to type them in the chat.
All right, so what are we looking at here, Matt?
All right, so this soil here and this particular farm is by Highway 57. And anybody in our area kind of knows that the Highway 57 is kind of dividing line between kind of more of your clay soils, and west is more of a sandier soil. So this soil is kind of a little bit lighter than what particular farm I'm in. But Andy dug this up, and this is actually out of the conventional field. And you can see when he dug the shovelful in here how fine this soil is. There's not really, I mean, he dug it out and it not
a lot of structure.
Not a lot of structure there. This was just dug right before we started here today. This is from the field right next door. And when you can see how—
This is from your bean field.
Yep, this is from our soybean field. This is why when it pounds rain, our fields don't erode like the other ones do, because there is so much structure to it, and it does allow a lot of pore space, and you can see it right there. There's a couple of them. This is what allows our water to infiltrate in our heavy clays and not run on top. So even though our soil holds more water, it still acts differently, being that it's more wet. But it's, how do I say that? Even though it's holding more moisture, it'll still allow you to plant, harvest without destroying your fields. So, I mean, this is the difference, and these two soils are very similar. And this is, you can see in them. So, and the more cover crops we can get, different species we can get into these soils. Yeah, there's your nitrogen nodules. The more diversified you can get into cover crops, the more your soil's going to change, and in a good way over time.
Yeah, and get the nutrient cycling going. Less fertilizer.
So,
all right. Well, I think we've got just a few minutes left. Any either questions or closing remarks from you, Matt or Andy?
All you have to do is watch me here and see. I can hardly break this, and I get to this one here, and it's like Matt said, that soil is just so much different, and this is what we're looking for.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
proof is in the pudding.
Yep.
That's right.
This field started getting no-till in 2013, so this has only been 7 years. So
I would just want to say on behalf of Ozaukee County, we really appreciate all of our partnerships that we have from NRCS, UW Extension. It's just great to work with Matt and the other farmers. They spend a lot of time and dedicate a lot of time doing this sort of thing. You can tell Matt's heart is in it. He believes in it, and it shows, and you're doing a really good job, and you're a good leader in the community. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess from my point of view, I'm actually really happy to be involved with the Clean Farm families as a demo farm. Actually, I got to be, I was close friends with my next door neighbors who are on the board. I actually got to be better friends with them just because we're involved in something together.
Yeah.
And like I said, each of us farmers involved in this all face different challenges. We have a few CAFO farms. We have a few cash crop farms.
Yeah, we're all learning together.
And
basically.
We're all different. We have an equipment specialist, Ken Falk, who's been a huge help with the tractor, being able to rent that, and
Bob Roden, all of his experience, and Joe Roden, Neil Majeski.
Some middle-sized farms, and then you got me, who's just a little guy. But
Mike Paulus, he goes out of his way to fix our equipment when it breaks, and he's just such a wonderful leader as well.
I really do enjoy being a part of this. Like I said, I got to be really close with the group, and
we're doing good.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, you all can join me for a big virtual thank you to Matt for having us out today and talking with us today. And I think I'll kick it back to Erica.
Okay, great. Thanks for everyone for joining today. This is being recorded and streamed on Facebook. So if you missed any pieces, feel free to visit the Discovery Farms Facebook page or the Producer-Led Webinar Series website later. I also would like to encourage you to check out the Ozaukee County Demo Farms Facebook page, as Matt and Andy have some really good videos on there, some live action footage of roller crimping and other practices they've tried. So check that out. And with that, we will end for today, and thank you for participating.